Welcome back to the BROWN News Network, America's most trusted news source. Stay tuned for the latest in political, military, economic, cultural, civil rights, and international news.
For those of you who missed President Roosevelt's fireside chat last night, we have part of it here for you now.
We must be the great arsenal of democracy. For us, this is an emergency as serious as war itself. We have no excuse for defeatism. We have every good reason for hope. Hope for peace, yes, and hope for the defense of our civilization and for the building of a better civilization in the future. As President of the United States, I call for that national effort. I call upon our people with absolute confidence that our common cause will greatly succeed.
Now we have political analyst Tim Lee to tell us what that means.
Thank you, Mike. Well, Roosevelt is trying to tell the American people that we're the major democratic fighting force in this war. This is a war against communism and fascism, and we need to protect those governments which support democracy. America needs to wake up and come out of this peaceful isolationism.
Well said, Tim. Now back to Mike in the newsroom for an update on the war. We have some good news from the Pacific. America beat the Japanese at the Battle of Midway. This battle, fought near the Central Pacific island of Midway, could be the most decisive battle of the war in the Pacific Ocean. Previously, the Japanese were on the offensive, capturing territories throughout Asia and the Pacific. The Japanese had planned to capture Midway to use it as a base, as well as entrap and destroy the U.S. Pacific Fleet. Thanks to American signals intelligence, judicious aircraft carrier tactics, and more than a little luck, the U.S. Navy inflicted a smashing defeat on the Japanese Navy. American pilots and crew had won the day through courage, determination, and heroic sacrifice. The Japanese lost their 4 large carriers that had attacked Pearl Harbor, while the Americans only lost 1. More importantly, the Japanese lost over 100 trained pilots who could not be replaced. Recognizing this defeat for what it was, Japanese Admiral Nagumo's chief of staff later wrote, "I felt bitter about the loss. I felt like swearing." In a larger strategic sense, the Japanese offensive in the Pacific was derailed, and their plans to advance on New Caledonia, Fiji, and Samoa were postponed. The balance of the sea power in the Pacific shifted from the Japanese to the Americans. Soon after this battle, the U.S. and their allies planned to take the offensive in the Pacific. On the Western Front, however, the Allies did not do so well. General Eisenhower had authorized the employment of the 1st Allied Airborne Army, which consists of 1 British and 2 American divisions, to support the British Army. Their goal was to get across the major water obstacles in the Netherlands, outflank Germany's west wall, and put the British in position for a subsequent drive into Germany along the relatively open northern German plain. They wanted to avoid Germany's major defense line, the Siegfried Line. The airborne attack was called Operation Market. The ground attack, Operation Garden. Complete surprise was achieved by the largest airborne operation of all time. Unfortunately, the Germans were not as disorganized as we had hoped. The unexpectedly strong resistance limited the gains to a 50-mile area into Holland, far short of the objective. If all had carried out as anticipated, this plan could have ended the war by Christmas.
Approximately 110,000 Japanese Americans residing along the Pacific coast were moved to war relocation camps in the wake of Imperial Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor. The internment of Japanese Americans was applied unequally throughout the rest of the United States. Of those interned, 62% were American citizens. President Roosevelt authorized the internment with Executive Order 9066 on February 19th, which allowed local military commanders to designate military areas as exclusion zones, from which any or all persons may be excluded. This power was used to declare that all people of Japanese ancestry were excluded from the entire Pacific coast, including all of California and most of Oregon and Washington, except for those in internment camps. The Census Bureau assisted the internment efforts by providing confidential neighborhood information on Japanese Americans.
At a special session of the United States Congress on September 21st, U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt requested the policy of cash and carry replace the Neutrality Acts of 1936. The revision allowed the sale of material to warring countries as long as the recipients arranged for the transport using their own ships and paid immediately in cash. The purpose was to hold neutrality between the US and European countries while still giving material aid to Britain. Various policies forbid selling implements of war or lending money to belligerent countries under any terms. However, there is still a need for industrial manufacturing jobs in the US. The cash and carry program solved this issue. The program also aimed to prevent American intervention in the war. US shipping interests were forbidden from entering into conflict zones. This program also required all payments in cash currency rather than on credit, preventing US business interests backing the success or failure of any warring nation. Despite its success, this policy soon left the Allies, especially China, short on cash, forcing US leaders to revise the plan. The revised plan is known as the Lend-Lease program, in which the European allies don't have to pay cash or arrange transportation any longer. Instead, the US would demand payment at a later time. Women are taking on an active role in World War II, taking on many paid jobs in temporary munitions factories and in old factories that have been converted from civilian products like automobiles. They are also filling many traditionally female jobs that were created by the war boom. And they are working at jobs that previously had been held by men, such as bank tellers. Nearly 1 million women are working as so-called government girls, taking jobs in the federal government, mainly in Washington, D.C., that had previously been held by men or were newly created to deal with the war effort. Women seem to be gaining more respect as men are realizing that women actually can work outside of the home.